We've been hearing about it for months now. The impasse over raising the nation's debt ceiling.
America possibly defaulting on its national debt.
Debt ceiling surrender.
Federal debt ceiling.
The debt ceiling.
The debt ceiling.
Debt ceiling.
I got off the phone with the president. I talked to him twice today, and after weeks of negotiations, we have come to an agreement.
The US is broke and they have until June 1st to figure it out. Why is the US broke? Because just like you and me, they suck at budgeting and spent way more money than they actually have. You know that one friend when you go on a road trip who never chips in for gas or snacks? They just keep saying, I'll pay you later or I'll pay you when we get back. Well, that's pretty much the US, and we're the friends that pay for everything. You've probably heard tons about this so-called debt ceiling and you might not even know what it really means, but it sounds a little scary. And honestly, I don't blame you. I'm gonna try and break it down for you for the simplest as possible, so here we go. The US debt ceiling is a financial limit set by the US Congress, essentially stating how much money the US can borrow. It's the maximum amount of debt the US government can have at any given point, and this could be used to cover its expenses and meet its financial commitments. When the government reaches this limit, it can no longer spend, and it has to either raise the debt ceiling or suspend it completely. Now, it may come as a surprise to you, but since 1960, Congress has acted 78 separate times to either raise, extend, or revise the definition of the debt limit. So now you may ask, why is this time so important? And honestly, I'm kind of asking myself the same exact thing. Anyways, if the debt limit isn't raised or suspended by the time the government hits that limit, things can get really messy. It's what the US will call a debt ceiling crisis, and it hasn't happened officially yet, but it might happen this year, as early as June 1st. Now, the government might not have all of its money to pay for its expenses during that debt ceiling limit or crisis. This could mean the payment for salaries of federal employees, payments on outstanding debt, or just not being able to fund some of the currently funded government programs. This is where it could get bad, because this could mean a government shutdown, where non-essential workers stop getting paid, they stop working, and we lose a lot of services that we have today. And you think that's pretty bad? Wait till you hear this. If the debt ceiling isn't raised by the time it hits that limit, the US government could default on its debt. The same way you and I can default on our debt. That means it failed to make payments on its obligations and on its bonds, and that's a huge problem because the US treasuries are considered safe vehicle. If the US defaults, it would seriously shake up investor confidence in the US itself, and I don't even want to begin to talk about international effects. The US owes money to other countries. If we default on that, those countries won't rely on us, they won't trust the United States government. Now, if investors lose their trust in the US treasuries and the US government, they might sell their assets, hold cash, and stop the economy from essentially moving altogether. Well, the same goes for the government and for businesses. The higher APR, the less money that goes through that can be put into the economy, causing an overall economy slowdown, which means less work for you and me, which means less salaries, which means we... You ever heard that story about the pen? It's like, oh, if I don't have a pen, I can't write, and if I can't write, then I don't have this, and I don't have that, and essentially I die. You ever heard that story? If not, I'll try and put something up on the screen and you can read it real quick. Okay, you read it? Hopefully I did that. I don't know if I did it. Edit that in. Now, if you thought that was horrible, wait until you hear this. A debt ceiling crisis will cause a lot of uncertainty in the market, could cause a depression, and could also cause a recession in the US. And if you thought that was bad, you better buckle in because it's about to get a whole lot worse. A debt ceiling crisis would create a lot of uncertainty between the US and the financial markets that the US currently interacts with. Stock markets become volatile, international markets begin trusting us a lot less. The US can no longer borrow money from these countries. So if the US faces this crisis, it can quickly cause an economic disaster. So what is the US doing to prevent these economic consequences of a debt ceiling crisis? Well, glad you asked. With days to spare before the first ever US default, President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy are in talks for a final plan to raise the national debt limit. They've had talks back and forth, they work over Memorial Day weekend, and they have reached an agreement that they both kind of like. Now we just have to see it pass the Senate and the House. If it can do that, and there's really only 24, 48, maybe 72 hours until then we're in the clear. But if not, and people are against it, there's a lot of revisions needed, and it doesn't get done by the time we run out of money, we could be in a whole lot of trouble. Check it out. We just got word that the deadline for the US debt limit crisis was actually increased to June 5th instead of June 1st. This gives the government just a little bit more room in order to get a deal done. The president urged both parties, Democrats and Republicans, to act swiftly to get this deal under review, good, signed. President Joe Biden stated that the speaker and I made it very clear that the only way forward was a bipartisan agreement. What does this mean? Bipartisan agreement means that both parties of Congress have to agree on the bill, which means Democrats and Republicans have to be on board. They have to sign the bill and push it through. Now, we got word of exactly what was in the bill that is being submitted into Congress. Here it is. Let's go through it. Number one, non-defense spending remained mostly flat throughout throughout 2024, but will increase 1% in 2025. Also, remember how we stated that the debt limit had to be increased to a later date in order to avoid default? Well, they did exactly that. The debt limit is now suspended until January 2025. This means after the 2024 presidential election. It also requires Congress to approve 12 spending limits. The agreement would fully fund medical care for veterans. This would include a fund dedicated to veterans who have been exposed to toxic substances. Also, remember that COVID money that was being given out? Say goodbye to that. The government is now removing $30 billion from the COVID budget and placing it elsewhere. This includes rental assistance, small business loans, and a few more included in there. Remember the IRS hiring like 1 million people to crack down on tax fraud? Well, the bill kind of slashes that a little bit and kind of bites into that budget just a little bit at about $1.4 billion, which, if you're committing tax fraud, it's good for you. I'm not committing tax fraud. Just gotta say that out there. I pay my taxes. Also, food stamps. If you're on food stamps, you gotta hear this. The provision would include work requirements, increasing that age that you're able to get food stamps to about 54-ish, but then drop it back down to 45-ish by the end of 2030. Also, this might be very important for you, student loans. You need to hear this. The pause in student loan repayments would end in the final days of August. So if you've been spending cash because you're not paying back your student loans, you better stop and start putting into a fund so you can pay back your student loans. Also, clean energy tax credits, they are still in place in this bill. They tried to take it out, but there was some discussion relating to that, so they kind of left them in there. And so if you have a Tesla, I guess you're good. All right, so you're seeing this probably May 31st or June 1st. We still have a few days before the US defaults, which is pretty good. Let's see if this bill goes through, and if it doesn't, then we're screwed, and go liquidate your investments and go hold cash, because if not, we might be donezo. All right, peace. Check out another one of my videos if you're interested in some more of these topics, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.